The movie begins with a young and shy girl named Rose Miller arriving at a fashion house. Rose has a chaotic personality, and she's often late for work. When she reaches her workplace, she hears her employer, Gunter, talking about fashion and art. Despite being late, Rose organizes herself before joining the group. Upon noticing her, Gunter starts questioning her for being late. He asks Rose what her excuse is this time for reaching the workplace so late. He calls her out for being irresponsible and disrupting his day. Rose explains that she almost ended up in a car accident, but Gunter shuts her up by saying he isn't interested in her lame excuses. While Gunter is bashing Rose, the other models and colleagues start laughing at her. Gunter declares this to be an example of the pleasure derived from someone else's misfortune. He then uncovers a couple of banners to reveal the words written on them. He tells Rose that she should calm down. Her coming late and experiencing this just helped him illustrate a point. Gunter further explains that there's a part of every one of us that takes pleasure in seeing those around us fail. A dark passenger who wants the self to persevere at any cost. It's all part of human psychology, and that is what his new collection is going to represent. He calls it the Dark Night of the Soul. After some time, Rose is having her lunch when she notices her sister Chelsea, who's also a model at this fashion house, talking with the photographer from the agency, Brad. Soon, Brad comes to Rose and asks her to join him for the after party. Rose rejects him by saying that she isn't good at such events because they require a person to be social and extroverted. In fact, she prefers that her work speaks for itself. Brad is impressed by her answer and asks her to be his date for the night. Rose, who is taken aback by his sudden request, finally agrees to go out with him. After Brad leaves, Rose is joined by Chelsea, who, despite being a model, loves to eat processed food. She asks Rose how she tolerates being a vegetarian with so many meat options. Rose answers this by saying she doesn't like hurting an animal for her food requirements, and that it's kind of gross to eat a corpse. Chelsea then asks Rose to join her for the after party, but Rose tells her that she's already coming because Brad invited her. Hearing this, Chelsea gets pretty excited and tells Rose that she'll glamorize her for the night. Later that evening, Rose finally comes to the party, but is treated badly at the entrance. Inside, she finds Brad, who takes her to a quiet corner. Rose spots her boss, Gunter, and immediately hides from him. Afterwards, Brad and Rose reveal their passions to each other. Brad reveals his to be photojournalism, while Rose is into fashion design. Brad tells Rose that he likes to uncover the true beauty in things, and that he wants to be a part of discoveries in history. Rose tells him that her passion for fashion began because she believes clothes are like armor. They can make anybody look powerful. Hearing this, Brad feels astonished and kisses Rose passionately. After a bit of conversation, Rose goes down to the restroom. In a bathroom stall, she overhears a conversation between two women, which reveals that Chelsea had told Brad to ask Rose out. It is revealed that Rose grew up in a foster home, and Chelsea is not her real sister. When Rose was young, her entire family passed away in a car accident. She was the only person who survived, and has a lot of scars from that incident. The mean girls keep on making fun of Rose, and saying that they feel sorry for Brad, that he must take an ugly girl like Rose on a date. Heartbroken and sad, Rose goes out and confronts Chelsea. Chelsea admits to asking Brad to take her out. Hearing this, Rose feels humiliated. Chelsea apologizes to her, saying she only wanted to help. But Rose says she didn't ask for her help. In fact, she didn't even want to come to the party. Angered and hurt, Rose leaves the party. On the way, Rose gets into a horrible accident. She awakens in a hospital later. Her entire face is covered in gauze. As soon as she wakes up, Chelsea informs the doctor. The doctor asks Rose if she remembers her accident. Rose tries to speak, but he cuts her off, saying she shouldn't talk. She was in a coma for a week, and they are glad that she finally woke up. The doctor tells her that she damaged her jaw during the accident, and some of it couldn't be reattached. Hence, she has permanent disfigurement on her face. They used a wire to shut her jaw, and they must wait for a while before they can discuss any face reconstruction options. He also tells her that the bike ripped out her abdomen and parts of her intestine. After listening to this, Rose asks them if she can see what she looks like. The doctor agrees, but tells Rose that her face is damaged, and she should not worry about aesthetics. Everything takes time, and her face will heal with time. When Rose sees her face in a mirror, the terrible sight makes her cry. A huge chunk of her skin is now missing from her face, and the wire holding her jaw closed makes her look like a monster straight out of a nightmare. Rose tells Chelsea that she looks like a monster, but Chelsea comforts her by saying that she's alive, and that's what matters most. After Rose is discharged, Chelsea brings her to her house. She tells her that Brad left her an email, and tells Rose that she's sorry for messing things up between them. She further tells her that Brad is a really nice guy, and he even helped her move Rose's stuff into her apartment. After that, she leaves to run an errand. Rose looks at herself in the mirror and cries at her deformed face. Later, while checking her emails, she finds an invitation from the Borough Clinic asking her to visit them. The doctors at the clinic are working on a phenomenon called transhumanism. It aims to induce the continuation of human evolution into something even better. The clinic offers Rose a lifetime of free medical coverage in exchange for letting them do an experimental procedure on her that will fix her face. The next day, Rose and Chelsea visit the clinic. As they enter the clinic, a man watches them from a distance. Upon checking her out, Dr. Burrow tells her that he and his wife founded this institution to help people like her. He informs Rose that her attending physician brought her case to their attention, and they will treat her using a procedure called stem cell manipulation. It's something that's still under experimentation, but he assures her that it will fix her face. Rose tells him that she cannot afford this treatment, but the doctor says that she doesn't need to pay, because they are a research facility and they need human subjects for their tests. Rose further asks him if the procedure is safe or not, and he tells her that she will not be their first patient. He tells them that it is a life-changing opportunity. Burrow briefs them about the experiment, and then leaves them to decide if they want to accept the offer. Rose seems scared, but Chelsea convinces her to take up the offer, saying this is a golden chance since she is offering her treatment at such a fancy clinic completely free of charge. While watching them from the outside, Burrow smiles triumphantly. The doctors then perform the experiment on Rose. Inside the operation theater, the doctors wear bright red scrubs and the whole atmosphere is creepy. They put a jelly-like substance on her skin that starts moving and regenerating. After a few days, Brad comes to visit her while she's healing. When he leaves her ward, Burrow pulls him away for a word. Later, while watching Rose through a camera, Burrow holds a picture of his late wife and looks at it lovingly. When Rose awakens, she pulls off her bandages to find her face perfectly healed and more beautiful than ever. Moreover, she doesn't need her specs anymore. She runs her fingers over her face, shocked and overjoyed. A moment later, she walks to the pool, where she finds a TV actor called Dominic. She goes straight into the pool with him and starts talking. She then grabs him roughly and starts making out with him passionately. When she pulls back, she notices that she's bitten into his lip very hard, which has started making him bleed. She looks at the crimson drops hitting the water, and immediately rushes back inside. While Burrow is examining her the next day, she tells him about the previous night. Burrow tells her that she's having vivid dreams, which is a side effect of the surgery. He gives her some medication, with the warning that it may cause vivid hallucinations. He also gives her a protein shake, which he says she must drink if she can't do anything else. When Rose goes out to see Chelsea after this, Chelsea doesn't recognize her. Upon realizing it's Rose, she gets extremely happy. After going back to the house, Rose starts worrying about what to do with her free time. Chelsea advises her to start designing. Thus, Rose grabs her sketchbook and pens and starts putting ideas on paper. Brad comes to pay Rose a visit. When she opens the door, he gets stunned at the sight of her. Rose, however, is still very upset with him. Brad asks to take her out, but Rose turns him down, saying she's busy. She then pushes him out and closes the door in his face. That night, Chelsea takes Rose out to a party. Gunter sees her as she's entering the club and remarks that she looks well enough to work again. He then notices her dress and asks where it's from. Rose tells him that it's self-designed. Gunter seems really impressed and asks her to start working again. At the party, the girls start going wild after some drinking and dancing. At the club, Rose pulls a random stranger away. She starts getting extremely rough with him. She claws out his abdomen, tearing his skin, and starts biting into his neck. She awakens later, safe and sound in her bed. We're then taken to a studio, where Dominic is busy with a shoot. He has turned very aggressive with his behavior, even erratic. When the shooting starts, he grabs the female star so hard that she starts begging to be released. Dom lashes out at her for being unprofessional, and starts yelling. The director calms them down and tells them they'll shoot another scene where they can use his anger. Another actor, Trent, is then called in. Dom attacks him and tackles him to the ground. The director keeps following them with the camera, thinking it's part of the act, but Dom soon rips off Trent's flesh at the neck, making his blood spurt over him. This makes them all realize what just happened. Rose goes to take her medication, but an excruciating pain starts in her stomach. She drops the pills and collapses onto the floor, crying out in pain. She awakens on the floor to find herself much better. She drinks the shake given to her by Burrow and starts searching for food in the fridge. After finding nothing else appealing, she grabs a packet of meat and takes the meat out on a plate. After staring at it for a moment, she starts licking the blood off of it. We're then shown a man who has been kicked out of the club by bodyguard. While walking away from the guards, he sees a girl and hits on her. The girl totally ignores him, which infuriates him and makes him start yelling. Rose spots him and follows him to his car. When he notices her, she asks him if he can give her a ride. The man gladly agrees and lets her in. In the car, Rose grabs his hand and slowly leads it to her mouth. The man watches her with excitement, but yells in pain and quickly pulls back his hand when Rose bites into it. Rose taunts him, saying she's too rough on him. Feeling insulted, the man comes at her, only to be feasted on. Rose then wakes up in her bed again. Only this time her fingers are painted with blood, and the coat she wore is hanging by her bed. At the hospital, a nurse gets up to find Trent crying in front of a mirror. She tries to comfort him, and tell him that his face will be much better once it heals. Trent turns and violently attacks her, biting off her fingers and making her cry out at the top of her lungs. When the guards come to her aid, he attacks them too and starts biting them. Rose goes to the clinic and tells Barrow about her frequent and odd hallucinations and terrible stomachache. Barrow tells her that the medications causing the hallucinations and the aches are common for people undergoing transformation. When she tells him about her odd cravings, he remarks that it's a change of appetite that is also a result of the transformation, so it's okay to be craving different things. Rose goes to work after this. Gunther sees her sketches, which oddly are very dark and sinister. Rose tries to prevent him from seeing them, but Gunther appears to be greatly impressed. He tells her that her drawings are the perfect representatives of the dark side. He tells her that he wants to add one of her dresses to his collection. The opportunity overjoys Rose, and she gladly takes it. At the hospital, a doctor is seen telling a CDC member that the disease seems to be caused by a mutated, hyperactive strain of rabies, though the origin of the strain has not yet been identified. The first patient who contracted it has been found, Dominic. They go to see Dominic, who now seems to be unable to control his body, and is strapped to a bed due to his violent and aggressive condition. Brad approaches Rose at work and asks if she still wants to avoid him. Rose tells him she's just busy and has to visit the clinic. When Brad asks her why, she tells him she's developed an odd appetite. Taking his chance, Brad asks her out for lunch. Rose realizes she fell right into it and agrees to go. While sitting at a restaurant, Brad caresses Rose's face as she looks at his hand. Temptation takes over Rose, and she bites her tongue. She excuses herself and goes to the restroom. She observes her mouth in the mirror to see pointy projections emerging from her mouth. Moreover, an odd organ seems to be forming under her tongue. She walks out and grabs her things. The man from the car spots her through the glass and jumps at her. Brad pulls the man away from Rose and bashes his head with a fire extinguisher until he stops breathing. He then looks around for Rose, but she's already left. The doctor and the CDC member are seen next to the nurse Trent attacked, who is now exhibiting the same symptom. The doctor explains that the virus messes with the brain's functions and makes the affected go insane. It fills them with rage and makes them highly aggressive. The CDC representative and the doctor decide to vaccinate the ones who haven't been infected yet and isolate the infected ones so they can be kept comfortable until they expire. The doctor suggests making a public announcement about the infection and its effects, but the CDC member strongly opposes it. He says they don't need public hysteria, and the situation must be handled with caution. A blood-curdling scream is heard from the streets. Rose is shown looking at her face in a mirror, which has now been transformed into a strange organ. She collapses in despair and starts crawling on all fours. A man approaches her and attempts to comfort her, but she keeps hiding her face and crawling away. He follows her into a dark alley, where she transforms into an alien creature and slaughters him. Rose then has an odd dream about creepy walking doctors, who are bandaging the face of a woman who's wearing the dress she designed. When she later uncovers her face, she finds a disgusting, strange structure in its place and cries out in terror. Rose awakens from the dream, startled. She calls Burrow and leaves him a message, telling him about the aches and nightmares. She then checks her mouth and finds it completely normal. While drinking the protein formula given by the doctor, she accidentally drops it and realizes that the bottle is filled with blood. Later at work, Rose gets Chelsea in the dress she made for Gunter's new collection. After Chelsea leaves, Brad approaches Rose and asks about their earlier date. Rose tells him she was just sick, and she couldn't even remember going back to her house. Brad tells her he took her back. Rose seems confused, but she thanks him. Gunter calls Rose as Chelsea steps in front of him in her dress. She realizes he wants improvements and makes a few alterations to the dress. This impresses Gunter greatly, and he announces that Chelsea, clad in this dress, will close the show. The girls shriek in excitement, as this was their biggest dream, since this honor is given to the most magnificent dress and model on the night of the fashion show. A public announcement is made regarding the outbreak of rabies. People are asked to keep their distance from animals, as well as from people showing aggressive behavior. When a reporter asks Gunter why he's holding the fashion show in the tough times of an epidemic, he declares that fashion stops for nobody. Backstage, Rose notices that Chelsea hasn't arrived yet. Burrow calls Rose and asks her to come to the clinic as quickly as possible. Rose tells him she's busy and can only visit the next morning. Chelsea arrives and tells the other models that she's been bitten by a woman. A makeup artist then pulls her away to get her ready for the show. Rose steps out to call Chelsea, but the terrible stomachache starts again. Two men approach her and start filming her. An odd appendage extends from Rose's underarm and pierces through one of the men's throats. Brad appears behind the other man who is recording her and beats him up before deleting the video. He then gives Rose an injection and takes her away. The man she just attacked rises from the ground like a zombie and stares back at them. Rose later awakens in front of a mirror in the dressing room and weakly starts walking around in confusion. Glimpses of Brad are shown as he takes pictures of an unconscious Rose. Brad appears in front of Rose and tells her that she passed out earlier. He tells her to go to the clinic with him, but Rose refuses to go without watching her dress close the show. The fashion show begins, and Rose takes her seat beside Gunter. Models come and go as the audience cheers and applauds. A male model suddenly starts gagging on the stage. He manages to regain his balance and starts walking back, but stumbles and falls off the stage. He weakly climbs back up and walks back inside. The audience sends him off with applause, and the show continues. Brad again tells Rose that they need to leave immediately, but Rose refuses. Just then, a scream is heard from the back of the stage. An injured model crawls out, followed by a blood splatter. Rose tries to get to her, but Brad pulls her away. Chelsea walks to the stage and starts tossing models aside, as Gunter starts yelling at her for ruining his show. She jumps at him and starts eating him. The man from the street walks inside, now mutated and deformed, but the police immediately shoot him. Chelsea gets up and looks at the screaming Rose. The police shoot her as well. Rose rushes to her side, but Brad pulls her away and takes her to Barrow's clinic. When they reach the clinic, Brad tells Barrow that things have gotten out of hand. However, Stoney tells him he has everything under control. Rose says that she believes the virus came from her, because everything has been happening around her. Barrow tells her that she had an opportunity to prevent the virus from spreading. He sends her and Brad into a room, but as soon as they walk in, the door locks behind them. Through the glass, Barrow tells Rose that he hired Brad to keep an eye on her. Rose stares at Brad in disbelief. Barrow says Brad, a journalist, wanted a story, and this experiment was the perfect one. Brad denies this and tells Rose that he just wanted to protect her and that he loves her, but she pushes him away, saying she does not believe him. Brad starts banging on the glass and yells at Barrow. Barrow presses a button, as a result of which blood is poured all over Brad. Temptation takes over Rose, which Barrow starts encouraging as Brad retreats to a corner. A deformed creature with several odd appendages grabs his shoulder. He moves away in fright and pulls out his knife. Barrow explains that this creature is his wife, who donated her body for experiments after realizing she had untreatable cancer. Barrow declares her to be the breakthrough of this research. Rose's predatory appendage emerges and tears through Brad's throat. Rose uses Brad's knife to cut off the appendage, as Barrow screams at her not to. She also slays the deformed creature with a knife. The end, leaving the doctor to grieve over the loss of both of his creations. The next scene shows Dr. Barrow preparing meat in a blend of blood, while a news broadcaster can be heard in the background. The broadcaster talks about the violent rabies epidemic and what caused it. She proceeds to say that the virus was a virulent flu strain that has now ended. Dr. Barrow takes the tray with the meat and blood juice to another room, while we see moving tentacles in the background. He comes back and observes through the glass. Rose is lying in the same room as the source of the red light. As she wakes up, she checks herself and the strange alien structure in the room. Dr. Barrow addresses her, and she is shocked to see that her slit throat has been healed. She realizes that the doctor has, once again, used stem cell therapy on her. He informs her that essential immortality is very expensive, and she starts crying and banging the windows in anger, whereas the doctor smiles.